The forest did not greet him with comfort. It greeted him with silence, vast, unshaped, alive. Leaves moved only when the wind spoke. The air smelled of wet soil and unseen rivers. For the first time in his life, no one walked behind him. No one prepared his meals. No music followed his steps. Every sound, the cry of a bird, the hum of insects seemed to come from another world. Siddhartha walked until his feet bled. Each night he lay beneath the stars and wondered if this was what freedom felt like, a freedom that had no roof, no walls, no promise of comfort. Days passed, then weeks. His body thinned. His royal skin darkened under the sun. Yet, within that change, something grew lighter, a strange sense of clarity. He realized how much of his old life had been noise, pretending to be meaning. One morning, as mist rose over the Narration river, he saw a group of hermits seated near the water's edge. Their bodies were thin, their eyes deep as still pools. He approached quietly, bowing in respect. The oldest of them, a sage named Alara Kalama, turned and studied him for a long time. "You seek truth," Alara said, his voice low, patient, as if spoken from another age. Siddhartha nodded. The old man gestured for him to sit, then learn first to unlearn. Truth is not a thing to be owned. It is what remains when everything else falls away. And so he began to practice. He watched his breath as though it were a stranger. He followed thoughts until they vanished, sat unmoving until his body and mind melted into stillness. At times, he felt as if he had gone beyond the world, a vast calm, stretching endlessly in every direction. Alara would smile and say, "You have touched the formless. Stay there, and you will be free." But when Siddhartha opened his eyes, the calm would dissolve like mist under morning sun. The ache in his legs returned. The hunger in his stomach growled like a forgotten truth. He could transcend the body, but he could not transcend the world itself. One evening, he sat by the river as it reflected the fading light. He realized that silence alone could not heal suffering. A man could lose himself in stillness and yet remain blind to the pain of others. He bowed to Alara the next day. "Your teaching is profound," he said softly, "but my heart still sees something beyond this peace." Alara smiled, neither hurt nor surprised. "Then go, Prince of the Shakyas. Every path must end where another begins." As Siddhartha walked away, the river whispered beside him a sound like breath, like the echo of his own thoughts. He did not yet know where the path would lead, only that he must keep walking. And so the seeker moved deeper into the forest, where even silence would begin to test him. The forest grew harsher as he went. The air turned dry, the trees sparse, the earth cracked beneath his feet, whispering of thirst. Each step took him farther from the river's gentle voice, deeper into the realm where silence was not peace but endurance. One afternoon, he found another community of seekers living among the stones. Their huts were built from fallen branches, their fires smoked with damp wood. Among them was Uddaka Ramaputta, a man revered for his mastery of detachment. He greeted Siddhartha with neither warmth nor curiosity. His eyes were clear, cold, unblinking like water that reflects but never absorbs. You wish to end suffering? Uddaka asked. Yes, Siddhartha said. Then let the body become nothing. The teacher replied, Desire dies when the vessel is emptied. And thus began the second trial. He ate only what fit in his palm, sometimes nothing for days. He sat unmoving for hours until insects crawled across his skin and left without fear. When pain came, he did not resist. When hunger burned, he watched it burn. The body screamed, but he, the observer, grew silent. Seasons passed. His ribs pressed against his chest like fingers of a dying flame. His hair thinned. His breath slowed. The villagers who passed by whispered, That one no longer belongs to this world. At night, the wind moaned through the dry reeds like an old song. He listened, wondering if truth could really be found in the breaking of flesh. Sometimes he thought of the palace not with longing, but with a strange compassion. Those who feasted there suffered from excess. He suffered from absence. Both were chains, forged by the same misunderstanding that truth could be forced to appear through control. One evening, as twilight bled into the hills, Uddaka spoke again. You have surpassed all I have taught. You can dwell beyond body and thought. There is no further step. But Siddhartha knew there was. In that stillness, beyond hunger and sound, he sensed the same incompleteness he had once felt in his father's palace, a perfection that could not hold. If detachment was the goal, why did he still feel the pulse of compassion for every being who suffered as he did? If emptiness was the answer, why did it feel so full of longing? That night he sat beneath a dying tree, his body trembling, his mind torn between peace and despair. The stars above looked cold, infinite, distant their light, unable to warm the skin or fill the stomach. He whispered to the wind, If the body is denied until it breaks, what wisdom remains to understand truth? If life itself is rejected, how can I see it clearly? The wind gave no answer, but its touch on his cheek was gentle, almost human. He understood then that suffering could not be conquered by violence, even when that violence was turned inward. At dawn, he rose and bowed to Uddaka. Your teaching has taken me to the edge of silence, he said, but I must walk beyond it. Uddaka looked at him for a long moment and finally nodded. No one crosses that edge for another. Go, and may your path show what ours could not. Siddhartha left the camp as the first light touched the peaks. The fire of austerity still burned behind him, a fire that purified but could not illuminate. Ahead lay the whisper of a river, and somewhere near its banks, the next lesson waited, one that would no longer come from teachers, but from life itself. The path led him back toward the river, that quiet, patient companion that seemed to know every truth he could not yet name. There, beneath trees bent by wind and time, he found 5 wanderers seated in meditation. Their faces were sharp, their bodies almost translucent, their breaths shallow as candlelight. When they saw him approach, one of them whispered, "It is the prince who left his palace." Another said, "If he has abandoned gold, perhaps he seeks what we seek." They welcomed him, not with words, but with space, a place among them beside the dying fire. And so began the next chapter of his trial. Together they lived as shadows among men. They ate a single grain of rice each day, sometimes less. They drank from puddles after rain, slept on ground that smelled of dust and ash. Their bones showed through their skin like old roots reaching for water. Every sound, the crack of wood, the drip of dew echoed louder in that emptiness. At first, Siddhartha believed this suffering would carve truth into him, as a sculptor carves beauty from stone. But weeks turned into months, and his body became a ghost of itself. The world dimmed, his mind drifted between clarity and delirium. He could feel his heart beating like a distant drum, and sometimes wondered if it beat at all. His companions took pride in their endurance. One said, "Pain cleanses us of illusion." Another said, "The gods will reward those who conquer the flesh." But when Siddhartha looked into their eyes, he saw not peace, only pride dressed as purity. He remembered the palace again, the silk robes, the musicians, the scent of jasmine in the corridors. Once he had thought comfort was a chain. Now he saw that suffering could be a chain as well. One morning, the world began to spin. He tried to stand, but his legs folded beneath him. He fell near the river bank, his vision clouded with white light and buzzing sound. His breath came thin, his heartbeat fading like a wave withdrawing from the shore. He thought, "So this is how illusion ends, not with enlightenment, but with exhaustion." Then, through the haze, he felt something cool touch his lips. A woman stood before him, dressed in simple garments, carrying a small bowl of milk and rice. Her name was Sujata. She had seen his frail body by the river and thought he was a spirit, but when she saw his eyes soft, still alive, her heart filled with compassion. She knelt beside him. "My lord, eat. You have suffered too long." At first, he shook his head. To eat was to break the vow. The others would call it weakness. But her gaze was pure not demanding, not pitying, only human. He took the bowl with trembling hands. The warmth of the rice filled him like sunlight touching cold earth. As he swallowed, tears gathered in his eyes. He realized he was not being defeated, he was being reminded. Sujata smiled softly. May your strength return, she said, so that your wisdom may serve others. Her words sunk deep. In that moment, he understood kindness, not denial, was the true gate to freedom. When his companions saw him eat, their faces hardened. The prince has fallen, one said. He has betrayed the path. They turned away, leaving him alone with the river and the fading light. Siddhartha watched them go, but there was no anger in his heart. He whispered, "You follow suffering, I will follow understanding." The river shimmered beside him, as if bowing in quiet approval. That evening, as the last light touched the trees, he felt life returning not as luxury, but as gratitude. The body that had been a prison became a bridge again. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. In the rhythm of that breath, he felt the presence of all living things, each one yearning, struggling, hoping to be free from pain. He smiled faintly. This is not weakness, he said to himself. This is compassion. And as the night rose over the forest, he sat beside the river once more, a man reborn, listening to the water's endless teaching. Morning arrived quietly, carrying the scent of wet earth and jasmine. Mist floated above the river like a silver veil, and the first rays of sunlight touched the surface in trembling ripples. Siddhartha sat beside the water, his body weak but alive, his mind clear for the first time in many years. The river flowed endlessly, not hurrying, not resisting. It curved around stones, embraced fallen leaves, welcomed every drop of rain. He watched it for a long time, and in that movement, something inside him began to stir. The water spoke without words. Its voice was patient, deep, and kind. It whispered, I am never the same, yet always whole. I am change, and within change there is peace. He cupped his hands, lifted water to his lips, and drank. The coolness entered him like memory, a reminder that life was not meant to be conquered or denied, but understood. When he looked at his reflection, he no longer saw the prince or the ascetic. He saw a human being, fragile, breathing, capable of both joy and sorrow. For a long while he sat still, listening. The sounds of the forest came alive around him, the rustle of branches, the distant cry of a bird, the heartbeat of the world itself. Every sound carried a lesson. The bird's song rose and faded. The wind came and went. The ripples formed and vanished, all returning to the same stillness beneath. he whispered. Everything changes. And yet nothing is lost. His voice startled a nearby deer, but even its swift retreat seemed part of the teaching that peace was not the absence of motion, but harmony within it. He thought of Sujata and the kindness that had revived him. Her compassion had done what years of austerity could not. It had opened his heart. He realized now that truth could not be born in isolation. It needed the warmth of connection, the courage to love without attachment. He remembered the palace, his father's laughter, his wife's smile, his son's first breath. All of it seemed both near and distant, woven into the same fabric of impermanence that the river carried downstream. He did not grieve them. He bowed inwardly to them, as one bows to a teacher. The sun climbed higher. A breeze moved across the water, scattering petals from an unseen tree. Each petal landed softly, drifted for a while, and was carried away effortless. At peace, he closed his eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time, the breath did not feel like effort. It was the world breathing through him. He thought, the body is not an obstacle. It is a doorway. Through hunger, I learned compassion. Through pain, I learned patience. Through letting go, I learned freedom. When he opened his eyes again, the river was still flowing, neither clinging to what passed nor reaching for what came. In its ceaseless change, it revealed the path that words could never capture. He whispered, "May I flow as you do without fear, without pride, guided only by the current of truth." As the sun touched the horizon, a flock of white birds rose from the reeds, their wings cutting across the golden air. He watched them disappear into the distance, feeling no longing to follow. He was already where he needed to be. The river's lesson was complete. Tomorrow, he knew, he would walk to the great tree nearby, the place where his journey would meet its still point. And as the last light of day shimmered on the water, the whisper came again, a sound both within and beyond him. All that flows is free. The day faded slowly, like a breath returning to silence. The river glowed gold in the dying light, its voice soft and endless. Siddhartha stood upon its bank, feeling the weight of the years behind him, years of seeking, of hunger, of questions that no master could answer. Now, there was no one left to follow, no teacher, no companion, no sound but the murmur of water and wind. And in that solitude, he felt not emptiness, but readiness. He walked until the river widened into open fields. There, standing tall against the horizon, grew a great fig tree, its roots thick as arms, its branches wide like the embrace of heaven. Beneath it, the earth was smooth, cool, and waiting. He knew, without thought, that this was the place. He knelt and touched the ground. "Here," he whispered, "I will know the truth, or I will die seeking it." He gathered dried grass and made a small seat at the tree's base. The evening wind stirred the leaves above him, each one catching a sliver of moonlight as though blessing the vow. Siddhartha crossed his legs, placed his hands upon his knees, and straightened his spine until his body felt rooted like the tree itself. His eyes half closed, his breath settled into the rhythm of the earth, slow, steady, unbroken. Night descended. The air cooled. The stars appeared, one by one, each a silent witness to the vow of a man who had walked through every illusion. The forest hushed as though the world itself wished not to disturb this stillness. He felt the pulse of life around him, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of unseen wings, the faint heartbeat of the soil beneath. Everything lived, moved, changed, and within that motion was an order, gentle and vast. He remembered his father's eyes, his wife's smile, his son's tiny hand gripping his finger. For the first time, there was no longing, no regret, only love. Clear and boundless, they were not left behind, they were part of him, woven into the same fabric as the stars and the wind. He thought of Alara, of Udaka, of his 5 companions. Each had shown him a piece of the path. Each had pointed toward silence, but none could show what silence contained. Now, he would look within it himself. The night deepened. Clouds drifted across the moon, casting shadows that danced upon the ground like fading memories. Hunger stirred. Pain rose, and with them came the last voices of temptation. His mind whispered, "Leave this. Rest. Eat. Return to comfort." But his heart answered with calm, "I have wandered far enough to know that peace does not lie in movement." Another voice came, softer. "What if you fail? What if there is nothing to find?" And again he replied, "Then let failure be my final teacher." He sat unmoving. The body ached, yet the pain no longer belonged to him. It was simply another current passing through. The wind rose, bending the branches above him. Moonlight broke through the clouds and touched his face, a gentle hand upon the brow of one who had ceased to struggle. He felt no boundary between himself and the world. The breath that left him seemed to enter the trees. The stars that shone above seemed to glow within his chest. All division dissolved, only awareness remained. He whispered, "This is the edge of all seeking. Beyond this, there is only seeing." The night held its breath. Even the river seemed to pause, as though the universe itself waited for the dawn. Siddhartha sat perfectly still, neither prince nor beggar, neither seeker nor saint, only a man awake to the miracle of being. The first light of morning touched the horizon. It fell softly on the leaves above him, and in that moment The world seemed to bow. The long search had ended. The night of awakening was about to begin.